go. Pretty nice little bend, even with Hey there guys, as much as I'd love to be showing you the truck camper project all freshly clad in aluminum, this video is not going to do it, and that is because this project has become a little bit more complex than I originally anticipated, and that tends to be the case for me in a lot of these projects because I do most of them out of my head and I don't really draw out plans. So anyway, today I'm going to be building a sheet metal brake or a sheet metal bender so that I can bend the aluminum panels that will go on the outsides of this. You see it's got a little bit of a shallow angle, and if you look real closely you can see I've already bent 2 sheets of aluminum diamond plate on the undersides of the truck camper. So anyway, hopefully this will be interesting, and you can be sure that this project is going to bring about the next stages of this project. So let's get started. So here's what I'm working with for this very oversized sheet metal brake, which at first glance is going to look way overkill, but there is a reason for that. I got this I-beam, which is 6 inches across by 6 1/4 inches down, 3/8 by 1/4 inch thick web. I got that for free. It was about 9.5 feet long with some stuff welded on the ends. But this section right here, which I already cut down, was nice and straight. So I cut those ends off, and what I have left is about 7 foot of nice straight I-beam. And my plan is to notch out the corners to accept some barrel hinges like this. And what I'll do is weld one of the barrel hinges in that little notched section, and then on the other end I will also notch out a little section on this piece of 4 inch by 4 inch by 1/4 inch thick angle. Notch out a little section there to where these barrel hinges will have their centers right along the edge of this I-beam, so I can have it pivot just about perfect. And then I'll come up with some sort of hold down device on top so that this can pivot up and bend the sheet metal. So I've got the areas notched out on both the piece of angle as well as the I-beam where this barrel hinge is going to be welded. Again, the male side is going to be welded to the I-beam, and the female side will be welded to this piece of angle. And unfortunately I made it a little bit too big, so there is quite a bit of play. But essentially what I'm going to try to do is center the center of the hinge right in line with this little 1/16 inch gap between the piece of angle and the I-beam, so that when it turns it stays nice and consistent. And what I'll probably do is just tack it in place, like a couple of tacks here and here, just to get it stuck together, and then I'll bend it and see how it's looking. Well, it appears everything is functioning as I hoped. This gap stays the same distance during the entire bend, so that indicates that I got the hinges centered. I'm going to let these little tack welds cool, and then I'm just going to take my time and finish out the welds, so hopefully I don't distort the straightness of these pieces. And then I will go about adding some handles over here, a hold down mechanism over here so that I can bend metal like this, and then I'm going to come up with some sort of a little bendometer or something to where I can replicate bends by going to a certain, I guess, a dialed in spot. So at this point, the working component of the sheet metal brake is pretty much finished. And what I need to make now is something to hold down the sheet metal along this bending line. And that's what I'm going to be using, this 2.5 inch by 3/16 inch thick piece of steel angle. And it will sit right at the bending line. But I need to notch out some accommodation for the hinges. And then I'm going to weld on 2 pieces of 1 inch by 1/8 inch thick angle on the top so that I have a flat surface. And at that point, what I'm going to do is drill a hole down through here and through the I-beam, and I'll have a toggle bolt coming up, and then I'll just use like a wing nut so that I can release this and tighten it down once the sheet metal is in place, and then bend it. But the wind is getting pretty bad, and I'll probably just do all that and then show you the results afterwards. Well, at this point, this thing is functionally finished and ready to start bending metal. I probably will finish it off with a coat of paint on all of the non-working surfaces just to give it a bit more finished look. And then I'll leave the working surfaces like here, and the lower edge of this piece of angle unpainted so I don't transfer paint onto whatever I'm trying to bend. And a couple of things I wanted to note. As you may have noticed when I added the springs under there, you may have been wondering what that was for. That is to hold this up so that I can slide the sheet metal in underneath, get it in position, and then clamp it down with this little wing nut. And then the other thing I wanted to note is you may have noticed that this has some play in it back and forth, and that is so that I can adjust this for the thickness of the metal that I'm bending. So I can put it right up to the edge for the thinner stuff that I'll be using for most of this truck camper project. But if I want something a little thicker, I'm going to need that relief between this edge and this, so I can adjust it back and then bend. So now I'll bend a couple of pieces of metal that I'm going to be using on the truck camper project, and we'll see how it works. So for the first of my little test bends, I'm going to use some 040 aluminum. This is what I used on my travel trailer project, or at least the same thickness. And this is going to be used for the roof of the truck camper. I'm going to use 050 on the sides, and then the final test bend, I'll show you some 063 aluminum diamond plate, which I'm going to use on the undersides by the wheel wells. And this should bend pretty easily, and then the aluminum diamond plate will be a little bit more of a test. All right, we'll see how it goes. All right, well, I think that makes a pretty nice and crisp bend, which is what I need on this truck camper project. Now we'll do the diamond plate. I tanked that sucker on pretty tight. There you go. Pretty nice little bend, even with the embossing, which I will probably try to knock those down before I do the final pieces, since they'll be much longer, but I think it turned out pretty nice. And one quick note before I bend this piece, because this is one of the final pieces that's actually going to go on the truck camper, not a scrap piece, is that when I was doing my tests, I found that once I go over about 3 feet for this 063 aluminum diamond plate, the hold down piece of angle that I have here in the middle starts to bend just a little bit, and it doesn't allow it to get a crisp bend right here. I think I've got a solution where I'll bolt another piece onto it, but right now I just found that if I just do a very shallow score, probably 80% of this material is still there. It'll just give it that nice crisp line, and I think it'll still be plenty strong enough. And to try to make this go as smooth as possible, I added a piece of steel right here so that I can bend from the middle rather than just pulling on one side or the other. Hopefully that's going to result in a nice crisp bend. Let me see if I got a 90. Pretty close. I'm going to go just a little bit past. All right. Just a little bit past 90, but I think that is going to work out just fine. I think that is going to do just fine. I'm actually pretty impressed with it. So at this point it is officially finished, and other than the paint you might notice a couple of other changes that I made. When I was doing the long bend of the aluminum angle for the truck camper project, you noticed I had clamped a bar so that I could push from the middle to get an even force. Well, I just welded a bar and then I gave it a little paint because it kind of sticks out just to keep you from running into it. And then over here on this little bendometer side, I just added a little mark for a 45-degree angle and a mark for the 90-degree angle just to give me a couple of reference points. And then the biggest change you might notice is that I added a piece of 1/8 inch thick 2-inch by 2-inch steel angle on top, and then I welded I think this was a clamp from an old saw that I had. I welded the little metal portion on the inside so that I can have this crank handle to be able to add downward tension to the middle section of the lower piece of angle. As I mentioned, with that aluminum angle, once I got over about 3 feet, this would start to deform, and this just gives it a little bit of extra stiffness. And so far it seems to work well, although I haven't really tried to bend another piece of that aluminum angle since I got those pieces bent with the score. But that is pretty much it. Well, it's all painted now, and I think I showed clips of it bending everything that it needs to bend, but I have not officially bent anything since I added those last updates, and that is because this paint is literally still drying. I think I finished painting it about 4 hours ago, but I don't anticipate anything will change as far as the performance. It'll only be a little bit better. And those aluminum diamond plate are the thickest panels that I needed to bend for this whole project. So anyway, as always, I hope you guys found this interesting, and perhaps it will give you some ideas in case you wanted to build something like this, although I anticipate the great majority of people don't need a 6-foot+ long sheet metal brake or bender. And if you did need one, you could just get a little 30-incher from Harbor Freight or someplace like that. But I do appreciate you watching, and the good thing about having this done now is that I can officially start putting the bigger panels on there with some degree of confidence that they are going to have nice crisp bends that look at least somewhat professional. And then once those are on, this thing really should start taking off and progressing much faster, because without the panels there, I can't add the insulation. I can't add really anything that I need to add until the shell is kind of finished. So as always, I appreciate you guys watching. Give it a thumbs up if you like it. Hit the subscribe button for more similar content. And until I see you next time, God bless.